You may never exit from the standpoint of somebody shows up at your door knocking and says, hey, can I buy this thing from you? You might decide to sell it at some point in time, but let's maximize the value of it while we're doing it. Listen, your employees will be way happier, right? You'll, from a utility perspective, your business will be way more profitable. Your customers will love you because they're staying with you. I mean, there's so many great things that come out of that if we're just focusing on what adds value.
Welcome back to the TrustBuilt Podcast. I am your host, Alan Bennett, and today's guest, we've got Steve Toth with us today. Thanks for being on the show today.
Man, what a joy. What a pleasure. Thank you.
So for those that are watching or listening, Steve and I have known each other for a year and a half-ish.
Oh, yeah. Coming up on a year, I think, actually.
Yeah. We met at that family business.
That's right.
Wendy. So it was Wendy and Sammy and Angela.
Angela Belford's group, the Belford group, I think, put on the event.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And so the reason I was there, I'll share with why I was there, and then I want to get into why you were there, right?
Sure.
But for different reasons.
Yeah.
I was there just to connect. I was looking for peer advisory, people that do what I do, that serve family business owners, because my day job is obviously not podcasting, but to connect with others that help and serve family business owners. That's why I was there. If I picked up a prospect or two, that was great, but that was the secondary benefit.
Yeah.
But you were there for different reasons.
You seemed like a pro. I was like, can I just sit by you? I want to sit close to you. Like,
and we were sitting next to each other.
Yeah. We found ourselves at the same table. Yeah. I was there. I was actually looking for a business to buy at the time. I'd say lightly shopping. I didn't have a wad of cash in my pocket ready to spend that day, but I thought, well, I've known Angela for a while. I appreciate who she is and in the marketplace and her character. She put this event together, and I said, yep, sign me up. I want to be there. And maybe I can add some value. I'm happy to, again, network and meet people, but really it was for me to take the temperature of what's happening in the family business scene. What are business owners experiencing these days? What can I learn? Yeah. And then serendipitously, God's providence, I suspect, put you and I at the same table.
Yeah. Yeah. And as most people find when they connect with another person, there's this common ground. And I don't know that I could put my finger on what that really was for us at that time. But, to me, it's more about driving forces, the below the surface of the water type of thing that was going on there. But it's been a great relationship. It
has been. It's been my joy.
So I'm going to ask questions that I know a lot. I know a lot of these answers already, but there's people here that don't, right? And you've got such a unique journey. I think it's worth sharing. I really do. I think there's a lot of value in your journey through life and work that we ought to put that out there.
All right, man.
I'm glad you're up for it.
I'm up for it.
So let's talk a little bit about where, as a kid, did you mow yards? How did entrepreneurship, how did you get down that path?
And you nailed it for sure. I had lawns most of the time to mow. Somehow or another, I convinced my dad to buy a riding mower. I, did his lawn, of course. But that thing, I made a lot of money on that Sears and Roebuck, rider, 4-horse or whatever it was. I don't know, tiny little mower, but I made a lot of money in the neighborhood doing, a lot to me as a kid, that led into, I grew up in a house where we fixed everything. My father was a pretty handy guy. And so he would say, well, if somebody can fix it, we can fix it. We might not know how yet, but we can figure it out. We can learn. Buy the book, buy the manual. Because, there's no YouTube, back in the 1900s, as I like to say, it's like buy the motor manual and figure it out. Buy the parts manual and see how it goes together and then take it apart. And so I started working on Volkswagen motors. I figured out that you could buy a Volkswagen Bug back, and this is in the 80s. You could buy a Volkswagen, or maybe 70s actually. You could buy a Volkswagen Bug pretty cheap. And then you could, because they'd had blown motors or seized up motors or whatever, and you could just rebuild the motor for $150, including the machine work, and then flip the car out and sell the car. So then I figured out that I was tying up all my money, which I didn't have that much, in the cars. And so I just started rebuilding motors for guys out of my dad's garage, still living at home, bought a couple of tools. And I mean, it doesn't take much to rebuild an old school bug motor. That led into lots of other, items for sale. I built what I called tuned speaker arrays, tuned air quotes. They were just curve-faced speaker cabinets that I would, go to Radio Shack and buy the drivers and the crossover networks and then build these, high fidelity speaker systems. I mean, I've been doing stuff like that most of my life, for sure.
So how did that experience transition? How'd you get that to get to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks. I don't know. I don't have any entrepreneurs in my family. I have one uncle, distant, that does his own thing. But otherwise, my father was a career IBM guy, 35 years. Started when he was 19, working for IBM back in the mid 60s. And my mother worked for the city, very conservative family. The entrepreneurial thing, I just attribute it to the wiring that I have. Like, I was just created this way to see opportunity and pursue what I think sounds interesting at the moment that I hope adds value to somebody. I mean, if you've got a blown up Volkswagen, you can't drive it. Right. So for $400 or $500, I can get you back on the road. I mean, that's pretty good value. You got a car that doesn't work and now you do. It's why these shops exist. It's because they provide high value. I've had plenty of W-2 jobs over the years. I find a great team that I want to be a part of, or somebody I know that's inside and they say, hey, we've got a great spot. Like, you would really help us. You would really add value. I think you'd like it here. So I'll take a W-2 assignment for a while and then, let it run its course and say, okay, time to move on and go pursue something else. Mm-hmm. I have a good friend. His name's Alex. Alex and I have worked together 4 times now. We were on the same sales team back in the early 90s in St. Louis. He moved me to Austin, Texas to help him get a startup that was stalled a little bit, get that launched. Then he recruited me to join him here to work for a company that Honeywell had just acquired that he was part of. I ended up working at that organization, worked for Honeywell for 10 years, 9.5 years, longest stint in my personal life, my career. And then I was an interim executive for a friend's business out of Toronto, and I needed a sales leader. And Alex raised his hand and said, hey, what about me? So then Alex worked on my team. So those are 4 times. And so you have relationships like that. And, you know each other pretty well. You trust each other, which I love is the thread of this conversation. Alex and I have a deep level of trust. We know each other really well. That doesn't stop us from arguing like brothers. But at least we know from where we're coming and we can get to the bottom of whatever we're chasing, pretty quickly. So the entrepreneurial stuff, it's just woven all through, my history in and out of W-2 and entrepreneurial roles. My favorite entrepreneurial story, though, I'll share in 2000, in the summer of 2000, I convinced my then fiance, Nikki, to go back to grad school. She had a passion she was wanting to follow. We were married in September, and then in October, I quit my job. And so neither one of us had a job. I had a house. We owned a home with a mortgage and, all the usual trappings of life. And so for 5 years, I ran a motorsports marketing company. Really was more of a sales agent. She calls that my 5 years of being self-unemployed, which I always thought is funny. But anyway, so lots of stories like that for sure.
Yeah. I want to go back to the Volkswagen and your early entrepreneurship for just a second. So the way you started out is very individualistic, right? It's just you. You were a solopreneur for all manner of speaking. But as you described your journey, I heard more of a team effort. So that transition from solopreneur, everything operates through me and by me, to working with others and implementing others and how to get things done by activating others on projects.
Yes.
Right. So let's talk through that. When in that process, what was it you were seeing and what were you learning? What did you appreciate about how to work with teams and get teams to gel or to to work together?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alan. I would consider myself a student of leadership. I love leadership materials, way back in the days of driving around as a salesperson, listening to cassettes, Tom Peters and all the greats, the legendary, Carnegie. All the, how do we become great leaders? How do we grow relationships that really are founded on trust and mutual respect? How do we grow those so that everybody wins and we can do more together than we can? The sum of us together is greater than the sum of the parts. I think I didn't learn that lesson more. I think I learned that lesson most fully at the end of my 5 years of being self-unemployed. Basically, Nikki said to me one day, "Look, we're paying the bills. We never missed a mortgage payment. It was fine. Like we were doing okay, but we weren't progressing, as a newly married couple. We didn't have kids at the time. And so she just said, look," and she was in her second round of grad school, actually. And she said, "One of us needs to get a job. Either you get a job." We're buying insurance on the marketplace. Back then, it was a little different than it is today. So it was not inexpensive. One of us needs to get a job. Either I'm going to drop out of grad school round 2, or you need to go get a job. And that's an easy putt. Like that's an easy decision. And so I, hung my shoulders down and I'll get a job. And what I learned in that was, to your question, as a solopreneur, it just doesn't scale, right? I had 1099 partners that did graphics design and things, copywriters and photographers even, although I was, an amateur photographer at the time, still not a pro, building catalogs and cut sheets and sales material for people. It just doesn't scale past me. If I'm enjoying my time at the racetrack, watching the races and taking pictures of teams, or, I love when the car's in the pits and it's up on the jack stands and I'm snapping pictures of the running gear. Like, as a motorhead, I just appreciate that stuff. You're not biz dev at that point. You're not production at that point. You're not making, you're just participating. It just doesn't scale. And so I figured out then that, for me to grow that business into something beyond me, I was going to have to build a team. And quite frankly, Alan, I didn't have the chops to do it. Like I didn't have the skills to stitch together, or probably the money for that matter. The business was a lifestyle business. I didn't really have the money to hire pros, and they probably would have fired me as a boss anyway. And so, it really was about, this doesn't scale past me, which is interesting because now I find myself again in a more of a solopreneur's role, but I see a little different model. But I guess that's the best I can do.
Yeah. That having the insight and the vision of where you need to go is that's the biggest part of it. You got to have that first, but actually implementing and bringing on people and building a team and the way that you find success in that, it's the art and the science of how a business thrives. And I'm leading into where you are now and the stuff that you're doing now. How do you use your past experience in building these teams and getting over the obstacles or around the constraints that you've got? How does that work with what you're doing now?
Yeah, thanks. I think it starts really with a center around people and culture, really. And I think when you and I met, I may have shared with you, and I probably did because I shared this with a lot of people at the time. I developed a people and culture model, right? A framework. I can call it a strategy, but that might be a little generous on my part. It's really strategy-ish, it's directed towards strategy, but it's really a framework by which a business can operate at the core, the foundation of it being people and culture. And so for my current engagements, that's the first thing I sniff out when I go in with my clients. Like, what's the health of the foundation of this business, the people and the culture? And then having been a 30-year student of leadership, I have a great arsenal of tools that I've brought along from some of the greats in the world, of business leadership that I get to share and help them implement, really the tools that they need. And so, our friend Justin helped us with this story, really, but it's really is for me, I get to come in with my clients and help them build and then implement and then master a way to run their business that gets for them whatever they want, whether that's growth or maybe no chaos, or maybe it's an exit. whatever that might be. So the foundation of it, though, always starts around people and culture.
Yeah. One of the, I'm going to use the word entertaining, but I don't know that that's the most appropriate word. But when you are working with a prospect or a client, let's just say it's an early client, early stages of the relationship with a client, and you find they came to you for a reason, right? Whatever that is, right? Let's just say it's, hey, I want to scale. I need to bring on team members. I don't know quite how to do that. And you're like, cool, I can work with you. Let's do this. And then once you dig in and you start flipping stones and you're like, oh, I didn't see that at the beginning. And now we got a whole nother. Let's talk through some of that. When you start flipping stones and finding things underneath, what is that like? Yeah,
it's very often, right? Very often you have to take a few steps back, or maybe soft pedal the things that you had planned to roll out, or even say to the client, hey, I thought we were here. My mistake. Really what I need to do is go back a little bit and work on some foundational pieces and parts. Around, in 2020, I exited a startup that I launched with a business partner in 2015. And one of my investors ran a business out of Toronto. And he said, hey, what are you going to do now? And I'm paraphrasing a much longer conversation. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm not really sure. I'm going to take a minute off, having been beaten to death by this startup. I'm going to take a minute off, but then I'm going to jump back in. And he asked if I would help him with his business. He had a very simple commercial agreement. It was complicated, but it was just one task. Help me resolve this commercial agreement with a partner, channel partner. So as I jumped in, I actually took a W-2 role because for an optics perspective, it just made the most sense for me to be an employee. I expected it to be about a 120-day assignment. Shortly into that stint, his operations director or VP quit. He asked if I could run operations. I said, I can. I'm not sure I'm the guy you want running operations, but what I can do is flip over rocks and figure out what's going on, because I didn't have good optics into what was happening in the business. I knew the business, and I had consulted for him before, which is how I ended up becoming an investor in my startup. But until I started flipping over rocks, I figured out that what was happening was there was a break in which he stopped delegating assignments and began abdicating responsibilities. Stuff just was getting dropped. And by then he was 20 years into his business. It was mature. It was happening, but it had stalled, growth-wise, it had stalled. In fact, it had nosed over. And, I went back to him and said, hey, people are looking to you to be the leader. Like, they're looking for you. They want to know, where's the guy, and you're not there. And it's okay. Like, you've earned the right. It's your business and your practice, and you certainly worked hard to get it to where it is. And you can do whatever. It's not for me to judge whether you're right or wrong, or if this is a good action or a bad action. But there's something missing in your business. You need a leader. You need someone. And by the way, I'm not abdicating for the role. Like, I don't want it. I'm not interested in it. Yeah. I had that role at Honeywell and in my own startup, and I didn't want it. And after a couple of months, he convinced me to take the role. But it became that we had to unravel a bunch of stuff that it either, culture forms one of two ways, in my opinion. What we say and do, that shapes culture. And then also what we allow shapes culture. Mm-hmm. So those two things, the allow had really taken over in his business. Great people, smart people, very capable people, no issues with any of that. But without a guiding principle or principles to follow, everybody was just kind of off doing their own thing. It sounds like a good idea. Let's implement it. Yeah. But we didn't talk to our friends over here in sales. Sales would go sell something, but operations had no way to fulfill it. Everybody operating on an island. It's sometimes you have to get in there and flip over those rocks and figure it out. In fact, it's not sometimes. You know this, Alan. It's every time. Yeah. And that is just the nature of an enterprise. Like, I have yet to see one that's perfect, and I certainly didn't run a perfect enterprise. Yeah. You got to flip those rocks over and figure out what's happening, for sure.
Yeah, there's as you're telling that story, I was active listening and thinking about experiences I've had when you uncover those things. There's one thing to be nice and there's another way to be kind. Nice is, oh, you ought to. And kind is being a little more direct, but with a personal touch. And that's what I heard was being very direct with a personal touch. Let's take a deep dive. And something that you just uncovered was around vision. And to me, you shared a story of a lack of vision. And the reason I say that is the owner had stopped shining the light on the vision, and therefore it sounded like the team was a little bit confused because they weren't clear as to which direction they were going. They needed his input or insight or whatever. So let's kind of dig into vision a little bit and talk through. Share with some ideas or some thoughts or some experiences you have when there was vision or when there was a lack of vision, like in this case. What does that do? How does that muddy the water?
Yeah, well, that's a good. I agree with you. I think there's a big difference in nice and kind. And to me, I think being clear is kind. Mm-hmm. Let's just be crystal clear. Like, and that does not mean I need to be rude or come across the table or whatever, but let's just be clear. And I think vision is an important piece of that. Like, I think for that business, in that case, the market had changed, but their original direction hadn't. They were following a script that was written years ago, and it worked for years and years, but the market changed and the business hadn't changed. They didn't recast the vision given the new reality that they were living in. So they were operating, and this is how we always do it. Like, we don't do it that way, Steve. But we don't do it that way. I'm like, I understand, but the data say it's what you're doing isn't working. And so how might we change this? Like, let's just look at the data. What does the data say? And so I think, vision for me, the framework of mission, vision, and values is super important. Whatever you want to call that, your guiding principles, or I'm not hung up on it has to be mission and vision. That I spent years writing missions that turned into visions, and visions that were actually missions, and they always end up in the top drawer. Nobody ever looks at them again, and that's the corporate world for sure. But for sure, values is a foundational piece. And in fact, I just left a meeting where we were talking about values from in an organization, starting with the founder. Like, what are your personal values? Like, what things matter to you? Let's start to shape that. And then let's write language that we use to hire people, to fire people, to recognize people, to reward people, to think about who are we in the marketplace, the values of how do we want to be seen in the marketplace. And when we put a bunch of filters against those, I love Patrick Lencioni's don't fall into the 3 values traps. We want to avoid the values traps, particularly the values trap of he calls them permission to play, which are like honesty, integrity, the things like, hang on a second. You mean we have to say we're going to be honest? We're not just going to be honest? Like, what? We're not going to do what we say. We're going to show up. I mean, do I have to write that down? And if so, if I have to write it down because my people don't know better, then maybe I've been unclear, or maybe I have the wrong people on my team, right? So getting core and getting right down to the root of who am I as a founder, leader, and how do I want my organization to be seen in the marketplace? I mean, we want our values to do 2 really very important things. And to me, values are internal facing. If my customers see them, great, benefit. But I don't advertise my values as much as I say to my teams that this is who we are and how we're going to operate. And I want it to attract the absolute A+ players, the people that want to be part of this mission, the things that we're doing. Equally, I want it to repel B and C players. Like, wait a second, I don't want to be a part of that. Great. Let's shake hands, be friends, call me when you're in town, but this is not a great place for you. So those 2 things are important about our values. Attract A+ players and repel the B, C players that we just don't want, on our teams.
Yeah. You talked about early in this part of your answer, you were talking about his personal values, connecting the personal values to, are you saying you look at personal values to help create the business values that they need to match?
Well, I think in most cases I'm working for, my clients are business owners, right? Sometimes senior leaders, but mostly business owners. And so the business is really I haven't seen it too often, but I guess there are some cases. I know a few cases, but the business is really just an extension of who the founder is. Really, it really was built almost often by them or acquired. Maybe they acquired it and they put their own, stamp on it. But the personal values of the founder are super critical to me, in my opinion, to the foundation of the business. It becomes an easy filter for the founder. He doesn't have to try to manage two lives, which is an impossible task, right? I have one life. I have a work life that also has some family in it, and I have a family life that also has some work. It's an integrated, we just have one life. And so it's an easy transition for me to go from personal values into business values. Do these make sense for us? Yeah, well, that's how I built the business. It makes perfect sense. Now, we might put some language on the values that are really reflective of the trade. I'm working with a builder developer right now, residential builder, and we're crafting values language that reflect, holding a hammer and running a saw, and, straight and true and plumb and level and things that resonate, because they're going to be sticky for his staff, his team. Like, they make sense. Like, yeah, that's exactly how we do it. Why would I build a wall that isn't plumb and level? Like, right?
Right.
Of course it's going to be plumb and level. Hey, we're also plumb and level over here. Right. And so I love language around that makes it sticky, but avoiding the ambiguous, uninspiring, values, man. They should just wow, I want to be part of that. Yeah. I think it's important.
The fire pit that we're dancing around here is purpose. Having purpose. So let's take a minute to talk about purpose, because we're kind of circling that ring right now. Let's dive into that. When you find an organization or work with an organization that truly understands why it matters, what do you see? What happens? How does that company transform?
Oh, man. That's a great question, Alan. The level of passion, first off, the level of passion. It's so obvious. So I'm working with a real estate developer, and their I don't know if they call it mission or vision. Language is less important than the root of it. The root of it is, for them, is they build communities. And one of the founders has been doing this for 40 years. Amazing developers, both of them, just co-founders. This one founder's been doing this business, in this trade for 40 years. He drives by neighborhoods that he built 40 years ago. And now they have mature trees, and they've, and he sees community. He sees that he had his hand in developing the fabric of the community, where people live and their kids play and where they go to school. To me, the purpose of that is I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. It's so powerful, right? He's crystal clear. Yeah, we're not here to make money. Oh, we make money. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a business. It would be something else. But our purpose is to create communities. We're crystal clear about that. That becomes an easy rally cry. If you want to be a part of that, you're attracted. If you don't want to be a part of that, you're repelled. And then we can build values against that framework. These are the things that matter. We want lasting community. I can imagine him driving through a neighborhood that he built 40 years ago. What a sense of pride that must be, healthy pride. I had a part of shaping how those people are living their lives. It's crazy powerful to me. I just get so passionate about it, Alan. It's so powerful. So that, man, organizations come alive. People hear that rally cry and they are drawn to that, right? I want to be a part of that. That to me is very exciting.
Yeah, I call the first cousin to purpose. Once you have a business, or let's just say an organization, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a business. But once you have an organization that has purpose and it's clear with purpose, the first cousin is accountability.
That's great.
Right? So the first cousin, then holding people accountable becomes a whole lot easier once purpose is defined. And to me, they're first cousins. So let's talk a little bit about, when you run into lack of accountability in organizations, do you find lack of accountability in purpose-driven organizations, or just kind of share your experience around accountability?
That's great. Well, I think lack of accountability can be found everywhere, and I typically attribute lack of accountability to two things, both of which I own. Either A, I haven't set you up for success. I haven't been very clear about what it is we're after, what outcome we're after from an accountability perspective. Or B, I haven't equipped you to do it. Like, do you have the resources? I put you in a role where you just don't have the resources or the skills or the tools, whatever that might be. So first, am I clear about where we're going? And second, did I set you up for success? And if I've done both of those things and you're still not doing it, then maybe you just don't want to be here, which is perfectly okay, right? It's perfectly okay to not want to be in an organization, but it's not okay to not want to be here and stay. You got to choose, right? If you want to be here, this is what we're doing. And you're set up for success and you have the tools to do it. Now it's on you to do. So I always start from an accountability perspective, looking at me. Did I do my part? Did I set you up for success? And am I crystal clear about what we're trying to achieve? It's either a systems issue or a people issue.
Right. So let's go one step further. So we got purpose. And
getting me in the deep water, Alan. I'm getting into, I feel the water coming up. Like it's coming up.
When you have purpose and you've got accountability, what does that do to employee engagement?
Oh man, that's super powerful.
Did I tee that up for you?
Like you might as well. It's like a grapefruit, for sure. I think that really is. It's not the secret sauce. It's the sauce. It's the juice that makes it happen. Right? We're crystal clear about mission. You're super passionate and you want to do it. You're all in. Then. Man, people are just like on fire because then they get to live fulfilled lives, right? And the language I like to use on this, I got from my friend Steve Graves. He says people are flourishing. I know he didn't create the word, but he wrote a great little mini book about that. Like when we put people in a spot where what they're great at overlaps with what we need. If you did a perfect Venn diagram, and the third would be it adds value to whomever it is we're serving, and you see those people are right in the sweet spot of that Venn diagram, and they're flourishing. Then the best of them comes out, right? And I mentioned this to you once before, the language that you pulled on the thread to get me to say more of it, which was, I love mining for gold in people and in organizations. And you said, to what end, effectively, so that they can be the best versions of themselves possible. I love setting people up where they just are totally fulfilled with the work that we're doing. Not everybody has the entrepreneurial spirit, which is great. Because we need people that are great on teams. Otherwise, everybody would just be off poaching each other's employees, And so I think for me, when I see people that are in that sweet spot of that Venn diagram, but they're adding value to somebody or something, they're doing what they're really wired to do, really. And so they're just in their sweet spot, and it adds value to the enterprise that I'm leading or being a part of. Man, that's a great spot to be. You just see people come alive. They do their best work. They stay. They don't leave. A players stay when they're flourishing, right?
Right. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go one more step.
Oh my gosh!
I promise this is the last.
That's
step.
Okay, man.
We could keep going. I know.
I know we could.
All right. So we went purpose, accountability, employee engagement. We've tackled all of those. Once you do that, and you've got a highly engaged team, and everything's thriving, how easy or difficult is it to identify priorities in order to scale?
Yeah, it becomes pretty clear. Yeah, it does. It becomes pretty clear. I think if we understand what we're trying to do, really what is the core of our business, and then we look at the data. I'm a data guy, a numbers guy. I love the language that I think you introduced me to at first around enterprise value. What are we doing here? Are we building something that's adding enterprise value? And if not, then let's look at it, with a skeptical eye and decide, is this off center or whatever? And I think when we get to the spot of we're crystal clear about what our clients need or our suspects, even whatever that might be, prospects, and we understand where we're great, what we can do, even if it isn't our Jim Collins hedgehog, like we're the best at, even if it's just not, even if it's just like, what are we here to do? What's our purpose and mission combo? And it's aligned with our core values, then understanding what to do, what blocks to lay out ahead of us, it becomes easy, really. Well, it becomes a game of prioritization, right? And I have a little inverted triangle diagram that I use that I got from our friends in the SEPA world. I've modified, though, a bit, where the bottom of that triangle from a prioritization starts with de-risking the enterprise. Yeah. And this is part of the model, de-risking. And then from there, we look at strategy. How's our strategy aligned? Then we can look at efficiency measures. And the top of the pyramid in my model is growth. Underneath all of that, for me and my vision, is people and culture. It sits on a platform or a foundation. That triangle sits on a base of people and culture. If the base is too skinny, the triangle flops over. If it's too shallow, it doesn't have enough depth, then it gets squashed, run into the ground. So we have to build that people and culture piece first, or as we go, certainly as we go at a minimum. But then we can do those things in that triangle, and then the prioritization then just falls right out of it. Oh, hang on a second. We should do this first, or we should do that first. Given what we just discovered and who we are, we should work on these things in our strategy, in line with our strategy. The first things first comes pretty clear.
Yeah. Identifying priorities and how you chase whatever it is that you're chasing, having that clarity, I find can become the easiest or the most difficult unless you have that system that you just described. I always refer to the squirrel from the movie Ice Age 2. He's always running around trying to chase that nut, and he hurts himself trying to do it because he has no direction, but he knows one thing. I want the nut, and I chase that nut, and he doesn't let anything get in his way because it's clearly defined what he wants, right? And that's always, I like to throw humor into it, but that's what you just described is once all of that is set, then you know that, it's that nut that we're chasing, not a nut, that nut.
It's that one, yeah. Crystal clear, 100%.
All right, well, I promised you I want to go one more step, but
while we're here,
while we're here, you brought in the SEPA. So for those that are listening, it's Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and we all say we because both of us live in that world.
That's right.
In the exit planning world, what we're talking about, the big picture here is value, and you mentioned enterprise value. So for those on here that aren't clear as to what enterprise value, share a little bit about explaining what enterprise value means.
Yeah, I think through my lens, and you have a few more cycles in the systems and tools and resources than me, but from my perspective, it is if I assess the value of a business and using a framework and a tool set, I can put a value on the business today, a monetary value on the business. Then I can also look at the industry and look at other exits or other transactions that have happened and decide what the best in class business value would be. And then I can compare the assessed business value with the best in class business value and say, hey, well, we could get here. Let's put the systems and processes in place to do that, which was really interesting from my practice. I jumped in the middle, which is the doing piece, and I'm swimming out to the edges. Right. And the edges for me are assessment, really discover the discovery piece. I started in the middle, which was prepare, which is really the work of how do we make the business run better? How do we attract top talent? How much cycle time can we spend on identifying our ideal client profiles, the kinds of things that matter for us to build a prospering and enterprising business. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, when do we decide? Is this something I want to continue to grow or do I want to exit? So for me, I'm always looking now. I have much more clarity around this, having gone through the programming around SEPA. Of a lot more clarity around what's that look like from a standpoint of hang on a second. This is just once again a data-driven exercise. It's very objective, and I make it sound so simple. It's not simple. There's nothing simple about small to medium-sized business. Like every founder will say, Steve, you're crazy. It's hard. I know it's hard, right? It is hard, right? But when somebody like you can come back and say, hang on a second, I'm going to provide you a framework. We're just going to hang the stuff on this framework. And it's going to tell us what to do. It's going to give us a guide on what to do next. I love that model. For me, I jumped in the middle using Pinnacle tools. Right? That's a business operating system, a way to run your business to get the outcomes that you want. Mm-hmm. Like it's a little different than some of the other operating systems in that it's not an agenda-driven approach. It's a what do you need? I meet you right where you are, objectives-driven approach. So I get to work in the middle of helping my clients, whatever it is that they're after. Maybe they're 35 years old and they don't think they're ever going to exit. Well, I get to help them discover that. Like, guess what? The data is in. Everybody exits their business. In fact, I had a coffee this morning and the young guy I was with, he said, well, I don't really plan on exiting. I'm like, oh, you're taking it to heaven with you. Good on you. Like, I'm glad you got that worked out because I don't know how to do that. Like, good for you. And so what is it going to look like though when that time comes? I'm going to give it to my kids. Well, what kind of shape's it going to be in? right? What's the value? Am I just burdening them with the thing that burdened me for 25 or 30 years? Like, is that what I want to do to my kids?
Right.
I don't think so. I've already given them enough head trash and baggage. So, I don't need to give them this also.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I'm like, you're exiting, whether it's vertically or horizontally.
Oh, that's good.
You're going out, and what are you leaving behind? Is it collateral damage, or are you leaving something that the others can thrive with and grow? But yeah, it's two ways you're going out.
You're going out. I had a conversation with the founder. It might have been the week before last. And we were just talking about the things that are happening in their space right now. And there's lots of acquisitions happening. And yet she's not been yet approached. And I'm like, it's just a matter of time, right? And you have to decide at this point in time, what's your number? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you have to take it, but just decide, like, what's your number? Like, what would it take? And if we don't do the work to get there, then you're like, oh, well, that sounds good, but you didn't do any tax planning and you don't really know what that means. And you haven't run the rule of 4%. Like, you haven't figured this thing out yet. Yeah. And you might make a decision that you would live to regret. And so let's just get prepared. You may never exit from the standpoint of somebody shows up at your door knocking and says, hey, can I buy this thing from you? You might decide to sell it at some point in time, but let's maximize the value of it while we're doing it. Listen, your employees will be way happier, right? You'll, from a utility perspective, your business will be way more profitable. Your customers will love you because they're staying with you. I mean, there's so many great things that come out of that if we're just focusing on what adds value. I mean, we'll never save our way to success. And I say that all the time. Like, people are probably tired of hearing me say it. We can't save our way to success. We don't need to throw wads of $100 bills on the floor, right? We don't want to do that. But it really is about growth. Like, what are we doing to grow this thing? Where are we going to go? If you're done growing it, okay, great. Let's just maximize it then. Let's just make it the best utility tool that you have.
Yeah. And with purpose and vision and accountability and all the stuff we've talked about, having that conversation and having those goals identified become a whole lot easier.
Oh, man. Way easier.
So it's all connected?
All connected. You hit a home run there, Alan.
It's all connected.
You should write a book.
How about a podcast?
Maybe you can do a podcast. Have you thought of that?
This is the TrustBuilt Podcast, right? Trust. And everything that we've talked about, purpose, accountability, engagement, vision, it all connects. And without those, there is no trust, whether it's internally or externally. Right. And what I want to wrap up here, and I promise I am going to wrap up.
That's all right.
I'm not just going to make idle threats. When you are engaged with a client and you see that trust is building, not necessarily how does it affect you, but when you see the trust build within them and their organization, what do you see?
Well, I'll start with when trust is building between me and my client. Okay. I think there's a tipping point that happens around that, and it's and I'll actually back up a half a step. I'll talk about a prospective client, someone who I believe I can help. Going back to my friend Steve Graves, I have 3 filters. One is, does my founder or owner think they need help? Do they believe it? Are they at a spot where they know they need help? Second is, do I think I can help them? Right? Well, actually, do I think I can help them more than they think I can help them? And then that third is, do they believe I can help them? Right? And if I can't clear those 3 filters, and there's trust that has to happen in there. Like, they have to trust that I can bring resources and tools and practices to help them where they are. Because quite frankly, I'm going to ask for their financials. I'm going to ask for their worst hiring decision. I'm going to ask for that. When's the last person that, really defected on you as a leader, and why did they leave? I mean, we're going to talk about turning over some rocks. Like, that's all the laundry, new analogy. That's all the dirty laundry. Yeah. And if they can't trust me with that, then my ability to help them goes way down, right? It just does. The efficacy, we would do that, but I forgot. I didn't tell you, Sally left because, this, that, or the other. That would have been nice to know, but I hadn't earned it. Like, trust is earned. Like, they don't owe it to me. It's earned. And that tipping point happens And boy, then we just start firing on all cylinders. Man, it's just an amazing thing, the momentum that we build when we cross over that threshold. And I don't know, I need to read some more of your literature to understand a little bit more about the science of it, the mechanics of it and the emotions that go in behind it. But man, the momentum that we get, it's such a downhill ride when you cross that threshold. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fast convertible going through the mountains in October, right? It's beautiful.
I love that. Let's do that. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that there's people listening or watching this that want to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to find you?
Oh, thanks. I think the best way, you can certainly find me on my website. It's crestlineleaders.com. You can email me directly, steve@crestlineleaders.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, most definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do a lot of good stuff on LinkedIn. I like all your posts. Everything's on there. And hopefully soon that this podcast is going to be on there, you'll be able to share it as well.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Man, I'm honored to be here, Alan. There's so many great entrepreneurs and business leaders in our marketplace, and you chose me, and that's a blessing to me.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me in.
It's nice to have friends on here. Yeah. It's, that's the thing. Even though we do similar things, there's abundance out there. And there's a lot of strength in people forming together to help serve others in their way. So I think it's great. That's a lovely relationship.
Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate you, Alan.
All right. Thanks for being on, Steve.
My pleasure.